From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, along with Jeff Wickman. Coming up, K-State's Glynn Tonsor on this week's cattle market segment. He'll share the latest projections on net returns to cattle feeding for the remainder of 2018. And Glynn talks about the trade discussions that took place at the recent World Meat Congress he attended. Also, K-State's Doug Jardine will join Jeff to advise you corn and soybean producers about a few disease concerns starting to show up in Kansas stands, including soybean root rot and cyst nematode, corn lesion nematode, and corn bacterial streak. And later, on this week's 4-H segment, Jeff talks with K-State's Andrea Feldkamp about the 4-H Family and Consumer Science Judging Activity. All that here on Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Glad to have you aboard for this Agriculture Today here on the K-State Radio Network. For our cattle market commentary this week, we welcome back in Glynn Tonsor, livestock economist with K-State Research and Extension. We've quite an assortment of things we'll get into, including the latest projections on cattle feedlot returns coming up here for the remainder of 2018 and more. But this past week, it was a mixed bag cash to futures, Glynn. The futures market improving some, but the cash market not getting much traction.
Yeah, we were either flat or up, so it was a pleasant week to diagnose what was going on. Let's start cash trade. Fed cattle through Friday, we were at about 114. Pretty limited trade. We'll call that flat for the week. When you compare that with the board, the nearby June live cattle contract closed Friday at $110. That was up a full $5 for the week. And it's important to note, at least on the board, that's the highest we've had since mid-March. So there's been a nice rally there over the last 10 days. When you go back over to feeder cattle, cash trade, depending on what market AMS was quoting, they were either flat to $5 up. Here within Kansas, the Pratt market was firm, maybe even $6 up, depending on weight class. 7 to 7.5 weights traded at 147, and Pratt 8 to 8.5 weights at 142. We flip back over to the board. August feeder cattle closed the week at a little over 147, is about $1 higher for the week. So if you back up, what was underneath that was fairly calm trade, low volume trade around the countryside, with a few examples of positive pull up on the board. And I think that stemmed to some trade developments, which we'll comment on the back half of our discussion here. But before we leave this week's dynamics, we'll highlight the wholesale trade. So cutout choice was $2.26 on Friday. That was off $1 from the prior Friday. And likewise, select was down $1 from the prior Friday. I will narrow in on that for just a moment. The choice select spread last Friday was at $23, and that's a full $7 lower than it was last year. I'm highlighting that because here, early to mid-June is commonly the peak in the choice select spread, and we have pulled back on the choice select spread a little bit over the last 2 weeks. That's worth watching to see if we've already set that high or not. At the same time, I don't want to overreact to it because we're producing a higher percentage choice than we have in the past, and that alone is going to work against just supply and demand dynamics of the choice select spread. If we have more of it available, then the premium for it doesn't have to be as high. So I'm not going to say that the bottom's falling out of demand at all there, but for those that track that, we are probably peaking on the choice select spread at a lower level than we did last year.
So something of a red flag, but maybe not bright red.
Well, I'd say it's worth watching is the point, and it's convoluted because the mix of cattle we're producing has changed as well. So you're comparing apples and oranges a little bit because we have more choice beef available than in the past, but nonetheless, it is worth watching because if we continue to have weakness there and other adverse demand signs grow, then I'm going to get very concerned on cattle prices. So it's more just something to watch than it is a major red flag at this point.
Glynn, as you said, trade issues are front and center just about anywhere in agriculture. The cattle market, no exception. We want to delve into those in just a moment. But you have put together your latest projected returns to finishing cattle in Kansas feedlots. And as we know, prices being what they are, there's red ink out there yet.
There is, and there's reason to be concerned, particularly in the next 5 or 6 months. But there's also a reason to say maybe these Tonsor-led K-State oriented estimates are a little too conservative, and I want to clarify that. So most know I monthly pull these together. I'm using Kansas cash prices, presuming no risk management. So presuming you didn't hedge the cattle when you place them, presuming you didn't hedge the corn in advance, those kind of things. And I'm using a historic basis, and that's the part I want to highlight on for a moment, is at least in recent months, it's proven to be pretty conservative to use historic fed cattle basis numbers. Cash price has been stronger than the board for several months, more so than in the past. So the actual price received by producers who are not hedged has been higher than I was projecting for some time. So the negative numbers I'm going to give you here in a moment might be a little bit too conservative given that disclaimer. Spinning around, maybe there's reason for hope. If basis continues to be strong, maybe that will help us limit some of these losses. That being said, for steers, closeouts May, which I recognize May's behind us, but I still have a one-month lag in this effort. Between May and September of 2018, projections are in excess of $100 losses. And then the back end, so Q4 of 2018, and we're actually projecting the first 2 months of 2019, are between $50 and $100 per head loss. Each of those presume a fed basis that's 0 to plus $2 or $3, depending on what month we're looking at. And we've had some recent months where basis has been $10 to $15. So the reason I'm highlighting that is in the event basis is $5 stronger than I'm currently projecting, and we're selling 1,400-pound steers, that adds basically $70 of value, sales price. So the back half of these projections might be closer to break-even than I'm currently saying, and those first 4 or 5 months here this summer might be half as large as I'm currently projecting if, and this is a very important focused if, is if that fed cattle basis continues to be stronger than it has been in the past.
Any worries about the cost of gains, though, with corn prices relatively stable, if nothing else?
Yeah, I would actually say there's some reasons for optimism there in the sense that this is the opposite of what my colleague Dan O'Brien has to talk about. But with the pullback in grain prices, maybe there's going to be some more opportunities for cheaper cost of gain as we go further into this feeding horizon. At the moment, the way I do this is I'm pulling information off the corn futures market. Mm-hmm. So I'm using similar information that Dan O'Brien would be speaking to, but around the countryside, you might have unique basis opportunities, which would help pull down the actual cost of gain relative to what I have booked into here. So for those that followed this PDF I put on agmanager.info, I purposely have 2 sentences in there saying, please compare to your own situation. Right. This is like a barometer for the region, and that's exactly what I intend it to be, as a barometer of trends. But to your point on cost of gain, I honestly think there's some producers that have $10, maybe $15 per hundredweight lower cost of gain than I'm currently putting in here. And if that's the case, then obviously your returns are going to be better than this benchmark is projecting.
But the message in the main here is that improvement is coming, although it still may be below break even. The pain won't be as severe.
I'm optimistic of that, but it all hinges on trade, which is what we're going to turn to now.
Yeah. And let's do just that. And what are your observations? There's so much going on, and you've had a chance to attend a recent conference where trade came forth. Talk about that.
So I was at the World Meat Congress, which was a pleasure. It's the first time I was able to be there, about 10 days ago at this point, down in Dallas. And major leaders from around the world were there, including those of ours here in the U.S. Of course, it was U.S. hosted, so there's a large U.S. presence there. And this is just a Tonsor opinion from sitting in the room for a couple of days, but it's very clear that everybody, whether you came from Argentina, Canada, Mexico, U.S., wherever you came from, recognizes the critical role of trade, both from a producer as well as a consumer perspective on meat. They recognize the essential role it has in meeting the growing protein challenge around the world, how we're going to feed 9 billion people in 2050 discussion. But they also recognize that in general, we have an ability to produce the food, or there's reason to be optimistic that science will be there, if we're allowed to use science, to feed that many people. But it's only going to happen if we have trade in place that allows countries like the U.S. and others that have a comparative advantage in producing a lot of food and exporting it. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, because growing global protein demand is a reason to be optimistic if you are a protein producer. That hasn't changed. We just continue to see reasons of that. But at the same time, over the last at least year, there's been growing populist tones in several countries, including our own here, where there's some reasons of concern of whether we're going to be kind of positioned to not just produce it, but be able to efficiently distribute that food to the countries that are where that growing protein demand is at. I remain optimistic, big picture, but there's a lot of hiccups in this story, and we're all aware of the discussions about tariffs and for renegotiating trade deals and so forth. And that was a strong backdrop to the World Meat Congress.
And just to tie off the trade comments, the latest export figures for meats in general, beef in particular, were quite favorable.
They're very favorable, and it's hard to overstate these. So both beef and pork had excellent April. So there's a lag in this data that USMEF brings together. Beef was up 11% in volume and 23% in value for April of 2018 relative to April of 2017. That value number is the fourth highest on record. That's important to note. USMEF values, they estimate the value being added to every steer based upon trade at $328 per head. So if we assume a 1,400-pound steer, just for simplicity for a moment, that equates to $23 per hundredweight of value being added. And what USMEF is doing there is they're taking things like beef tongue and liver that are worth a lot more outside the U.S., and they're saying, okay, what are we currently selling them for in foreign markets? What's our best estimate of what they would sell for if they had to stay here? What's that difference times the pounds on them and add up? And that's where you come up with that $328 of value. I think that's a very defendable way to think about it because I always use the example, my household probably is not going to pay the same for beef tongue that some others that actually, desire it are going to. And that is the market working, right? The whole point of trade is to have those that have an advantage in producing it, sending those products to those that value it the most. There's nothing saying all the products coming off one steer are of most value in one country. They aren't, right? So that's the value of trade, is allowing us to align those supply and demand dynamics. That's where you get those big numbers. And if I could emphasize one thing, those April numbers are hyper strong, really good, despite what is a lot of trade and political noise. I just caught that. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic that we are already taking advantage of that growing protein story, or the demand for more protein. My question is, how much better could it be if we reduce some of that uncertainty? How much better deals could we strike, and how much, could we get that for a longer term rather than just in the short term? So I remain optimistic the U.S. is going to do well in this story. I'm just maybe a little bit greedy, but think maybe we could do well with less uncertainty and reduce the heartburn for a lot of folks that are involved.
Well, we'll close on that hopeful point. And Glynn, thanks as always for coming over.
Thank you.
Lending us his insight on the cattle market trends. That's Glynn Tonsor, livestock economist, K-State Research and Extension, and don't forget to check out Glynn's material on the agmanager.info website. Producers, you're tuned to Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. Corn and soybean producers are being urged to scout their fields looking for a few potential disease issues. With more, here's K-State row crop disease specialist Doug Jardine. Doug, first off, some concerns out there in the soybean fields, root rot one of them.
Well, yes. We're just really starting to get samples into the diagnostic clinic. We really haven't seen a whole lot of things in soybeans, but one thing that did come in from north central part of the state was a soybean sample that had Rhizoctonia seedling blight on it. Kind of mention that because as we think about across the state, we've had some places where the weather conditions have probably been very favorable. Those weather conditions are wet soils and really hot and humid. And while we haven't had widespread rains across the state, we certainly have had areas that have caught 1 and 2 inch showers. And where there's soybeans in the ground, they very easily could be seeing some Rhizoctonia seedling blight, especially if they had not used a fungicide seed treatment. But even where they did use a fungicide treatment, we're getting to the stage of soybean development. Those products are only good for 2 or 3 weeks. So we may be on the back end of the efficacy of those problems. And even with treated seed, they might start seeing some symptoms. And with regard to symptoms, some of it's simply just small, younger plants just starting to dry up and die. The neighbor plants may be perfectly healthy. It's not uncommon to find just random scattered plants across the field. Or if you get into a lower, wetter area of the field, especially if it's in no-till, and so you've got a lot of crop debris from the previous crop, kind of keeping those soils from drying out, you'll see them there. And kind of a secondary symptom that you're going to see is a reddening or a browning of that main stem, and sometimes you'll even kind of see a sunken canker there. There's nothing they can do about it at this point as long as stand loss isn't too severe. I mean, the surrounding plants will grow and compensate for it. But, this time of year, a lot of people like to blame anything they see out there on the herbicides. And occasionally it is the herbicide, but a lot of times it's some of these other kind of secondary problems like Rhizoctonia seedling blight.
Also some cyst nematode to be on the lookout for?
Well, we always have to talk about soybean cyst nematode because it's a problem that doesn't go away. It's in the soil. We talk about when you have the time, and really the best time to sample is late October after harvest, but in reality you can sample any time that you have the time. And so if you've got some soybean fields now, or as they progress, where you've got some areas of the field that may be kind of uneven growth or maybe even stunted and discolored, or they just don't seem to be doing right, that would be areas that we would recommend maybe you take a soybean cyst nematode test. It's very easy. Use a standard soil probe, about 6 to 8 inches deep. Take the sample directly in the rows because we want to get bits and pieces of the root system in there, because if there are nematodes there, that's where they're going to be. If you got 30-inch rows and you take it halfway in between the 2 rows, you're probably going to miss them. We always encourage that. There may be seeing commercials or advertisements in some of their trade papers about the new Soybean Cyst Nematode Coalition. And this is just an educational effort across all the soybean growing states in the United States. It's funded with checkoff dollars from the United Soybean Board and the North Central Soybean Research Program. And it's just to get the word out that our current sources of resistance are starting to break down and not as effective as they used to be. And it's really important for A, to know whether or not you have the cyst nematode, and then B, if you have it, and kind of the tagline is, do you know what your numbers are? In other words, you got 100 eggs or 200 eggs or 1,000 eggs or 10,000 eggs per a half a cup of soil, which is the standard amount we use in a soil test here in Kansas. So, never let it get too far from your mind. Probably the money spent on a soybean cyst nematode test most often is probably of greater value than what you would spend on a fungicide treatment when maybe you really don't need one.
Also, for corn producers, they may be one of scouting their fields as well.
Right. There's several things going on, and I think right now for many fields in the state, particularly in the western half of the state where this problem is most severe, and that is root lesion nematode. Any of the nematodes, the reason they cause so much damage often is because they're out of sight, out of mind. They're below the soil, they're feeding on the roots, and the farmer can't, visibly see the damage. There's no spots or streaks or lesions on the leaf. It's not like insect damage where you can see the insect or the chewing. Sometimes, especially with root lesion, the only actual symptom may be lack of yield, which you might be able to pick up with a yield monitor at the end of the season, but obviously by then it's way too late. If the nematode populations are pretty high, you can see some stunting, usually in patchy spots in the field. And if it's very severe, there may also be some yellowing that goes along with that. But, you get out into western Kansas, it can be passed off as an iron chlorosis problem or, again, maybe something to do with the herbicide, and they really don't pay much attention. Up in Nebraska, they've documented 30 bushel per acre yield losses. Our nematologist here in Kansas says in the most severe spots, in the most severe fields, we could see yield loss up to 40%. So if you got 200 bushel corn potential and you're losing 40% in all or parts of the field, that can be a significant number. So 30 to 40 days after emergence is the best time to check for root lesion nematode. It's a pretty simple process. You need to grab a shovel and you go out, and in an area of the field where you suspect you have a problem, you simply dig up a half a dozen plants or so. And as you dig those plants up, we'd like you to keep some of the soil that surrounds the roots with the sample. So we want the whole plant with the roots, and we want at least some of the soil that's around the roots. And you can put those in sealable plastic bags, and you can take them in either to your local extension office, and they'll be happy to box them up and mail them off for you. Or if you prefer, you can send it directly to our plant disease diagnostic lab. Without getting into a little details, if you get on the K-State website and get your way to the plant pathology department's webpage, click on extension, and then there'll be a tab that says diagnostic lab, and there'll be instructions on collecting and shipping the samples that they can follow. Or again, they can get that information through their local county agent. On the downside to this is that if it's determined that you have a problem, you're out of luck for this year. But what it'll do is it'll help you make management plans for next year. And as far as management goes, rotation isn't that great of a management plan because this nematode has quite a broad host range. And so it likes soybeans and grain sorghum, and it really likes wheat, actually. Tillage can help, but, when we're out in western Kansas, and I get it, we're in a no-till continuous corn cropping system because of economics. But that's where we're going to see the problem, particularly as the soil texture gets sandier. But having said that, there are some kind of old-time nematicide seed treatments like Counter that are still available, and if guys can figure out a way to get them delivered into the seed furrow or in a T-band above the row, they're still very effective, although probably most modern planters don't have that ability unless they've been altered on site. There are also some nematicide seed treatments that are available. Now, to be honest, the results in university trials have been inconsistent. Sometimes they look like they do a pretty good job, and sometimes we really can't see where you've gotten the bang for your buck. But if you have a problem, they're probably worth a try.
A couple of other things to keep an eye on would be early season fungicide and hail damage.
Yeah, so across Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, in the last couple of weeks, there's been some pretty severe hailstorms and roughed the corn crops up pretty good. Some of the chemical companies will recommend the strobilurin type of fungicides to be applied to hail-damaged corn with the idea that it's going to help keep the green tissue green, or if those openings have created ways in for some of the fungi, that it would protect against that. But there's been numerous studies over the years, and I can think of several out of Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa, for instance, where they've either simulated hail damage or they've had actual hail damage, and then they've set up some pretty quick experiments and applied the fungicide. And the bottom line is you're really not helping yourself against the hail damage by the use of the fungicide. Kind of our mantra is if you needed to use a fungicide before the hail damage, you probably need to use it after. And if you didn't need it before the hail damage, it's probably not going to help. So as growers try to cut corners to save expenses, that's probably one place that they could do it.
Another thing that's showing up in Nebraska is corn bacterial streak.
Well, this is the new disease, first identified in Kansas in 2016. There was lots of it here in 2017. We got reports that up in the Cozart, Nebraska area, it's been positively identified. I did receive a photo from the Kinsley area in the last few days, which we hate to make a diagnosis just from a photo, but it was sure suspicious that it was corn bacterial streak, and the Edwards County area is an area where the last couple of years we've seen plenty of the disease, and that's an area that's had some big thunderstorms in recent weeks, so it'll be a week or two before I can get out there and verify it unless somebody actually sends me a physical sample into the lab before then. But it's there. And to remind people, we still don't know if there's any yield loss associated with that yet, but there are experiments in progress in Colorado and Nebraska right now to help determine that. But the main thing is the symptoms oftentimes are confused with gray leaf spot, the other really common foliar disease here in Kansas. And we don't want producers making the mistake of applying a fungicide to what they think is gray leaf spot when in fact it's bacterial stripe, because it'll be just a complete waste of money. So we've spent the last 2 winters getting crop consultants and county agents and other people who walk cornfields up to speed on how to make that identification, and so hopefully we'll eliminate that from happening.
That's K-State row crop disease specialist Doug Jardine with a heads up for corn and soybean producers. This is the K-State Radio Network.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. K-State Research and Extension is actively engaged in a unified focus on health. And Kansas 4-H, through Family and Consumer Science Judging, is bringing that focus to youth with a video contest that asks them to highlight a health issue in their community and find a solution. Kansas 4-H Family and Consumer Science Program Liaison Andrea Feldkamp is here to discuss the contest and explain how youth can participate. Andrea, as part of an FCS judging contest, you're really going to focus on health.
Yes. This year we're placing a spotlight on that fourth H, which is health. And so, Jeff, we're looking at how health affects all of us, and it really affects all of the program areas. For example, agriculture professionals are constantly monitoring livestock health and even aspects impacting crop health. Our horticulture professionals are looking at plant health. Family and consumer science professionals are concerned about healthy individuals. And then on the 4-H aspect, we look in particular at healthy youth. And so together, all of us value water quality, a safe and reliable food source, and aspects that contribute to healthy communities. So this is a topic we can all definitely weigh in on. And so based upon our 4-H principles, which are head, heart, hands, and health, we want our members to learn about health and discover how they can be a positive impact on health aspects in their local community.
And this is open to a wide age range.
Indeed, it is, Jeff. So we have youth ages 9 to 18 that will be invited to participate in this year's Family and Consumer Science Judging topic, health. And we do have 2 divisions, so it's not just all of those ages together. Our intermediate age division comprises youth ages 9 to 13, while the senior age division encompasses youth ages 14 to 18. Each age division will be invited to create and submit video entries highlighting a community health aspect in their local community, and they will choose that.
Now, is this individual or do they work as teams?
Great question. They will actually get to work together as a team, so they can be in teams of 3. Now, teams of 2 can definitely do it as well, but 3 is the maximum that can be on a team. So they would look at team members within their age division, so intermediate 9 to 13-year-old teams, and then the 14 to 18-year-old on the senior division. Some example projects might be looking at their local park. Maybe there needs to be more lighting so that it's conducive to a safer play experience. Maybe the kids want to look at their vending machine options at school. Could they have more healthier choices or more variety? Or another possible example might be looking for a safe place in the community for folks to get together and be active if they don't have something like that already. The sky's the limit as far as what youth choose to identify, and they can choose any health topic that they wish, and they're going to do some investigating.
They're going to do this by talking to people in the local community.
Yes, so they'll talk to adults and other peers and find out what they think about it, what they know about it, and the level of what they think the problem is related to that particular health aspect, maybe why this is a concern for their local community. So based upon the information that they learn and the perspectives that they get in talking with those adults and peers, they're going to create a video outlining what their health concern is or health aspect in their community and why they're putting focus on that.
So is this a video with just them, or does it involve some of the people that they talk to? How extensive is this?
They really do have lots of free way to go wherever they choose. They can include individuals, and some of them have interviewed folks and put that on video. Others have also taken them to the specific site and videoed what the concern is and incorporated that. In addition, we want the video to have a proposal for change. So what do they want to do about the problem? If they could put a solution forward, how would they do that and what would they do? So the videos will highlight that. Now, the videos are short. They're 2 to 4 minutes. So most people are like, oh, wow, that's not a lot of time. But we want them to be able to succinctly convey their thoughts and their ideas and submit those in a video format.
I like the idea of coming up with a solution because it's easy to identify the problem. It's difficult to find the solutions.
Yes. And from a youth perspective, we often have maybe different decision proposals than what we would do from the adult side. So it's been fun to see the ideas that they've come up with. Now, they have until July 10th to submit their videos. They have a form that they'll fill out with that, outlining some additional information about who is involved in the project and providing some details that can't easily be provided in the video. So they'll submit all that by July 10th. Our videos will be reviewed by some of our graduate students and some of our other professionals working with community health and share feedback with those team members. And then teams will be invited to participate in the state-level Family and Consumer Science Judging Contest, which will take place in Hutchinson, Kansas, on Saturday, September 15th. So this is the time of the Kansas State Fair, and it works because lots of folks are typically at that venue, and so that is the reason why we have this contest there. Other things they'll be working on September 15th, they'll have a puzzle experience focusing on health, looking at some logic-type scenarios that they'll have to use some of those problem-solving skills. In addition, they'll look at their video and do some expansion on their video as far as promotion and learning how to share their message with others about their health aspect they've identified. And then finally, the third aspect they'll do is an oral presentation related to their health project, and then other aspects that they'll learn at the contest, they'll incorporate that into their presentation that they'll create and deliver there on site.
And this is open to any 4-H member?
Correct. Any 4-H member that has the desire, passion, interest in working with health, we would love to have their ideas and submissions for this particular project. This is the first time we're trying something like this and in asking youth to engage locally and then bring that engagement to the state level. So we'll see how that looks as far as numbers go with participation. And we'll just continue to adjust to help make it work for the youth in the program.
This is something kids are used to doing, making videos, but you've got a little bit of an added incentive here with some prize money.
Yes. So Dr. Elaine Johannes has some dollars available to put towards community health engagement. And so top team in each of those divisions will receive $250 to put towards implementing the solution for their project.
That's kind of exciting.
It is exciting, yes. So it's nice because we're seeing the whole process go. They're doing the research, finding out the information about a problem that's affecting them and their community, and then they'll be able to come back and really put some things into play as far as making that situation better.
How can they find out more about this?
So we do have information at our website, kansas4h.org. And then we have an events and activities link, and they can visit the FCS Judging Contest link on that site to be able to get to the information.
And it'll be exciting to see what kind of videos they come up with.
Indeed. I am very excited and hope when we do get some of those that we'll be able to share those in some fashion with others that would be interested in learning more.
That's Kansas 4-H Family and Consumer Science Program Liaison, Andrea Feldkamp. More information can be found at kansas4h.org. And that'll wrap it up for this edition of Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.